not to say that this chapter is an anticlimax. There's no such thing as a anticlimactic chapter or a boring chapter or a chapter where nothing much happens. But if you're just joining in for the first time, Savta Susie, welcome. You are probably not going to get the best chapter, because chapter 14 is a little bit of a, let's call it what it is, a non-event, which is Yoav, who is the general or the politician or the right-hand man of David, of King David, tries to reconcile Avshalom, who had Amnon last week killed off, tries to reconcile Avshalom, who's been gone for 3 years, to bring him back to King David, and basically he has limited success. And what this is paving for is next week's chapter, chapter 15, where Avshalom basically starts hanging out like he is the next king. And the question is, what's motivating Yoav? Why is Yoav so excited to bring Avshalom back? Now, to understand this, we need to know what's happening here. Like, we had the story of David and Bathsheba, so we assume that David must be this young guy. But what happened 2 or 3 or 4 chapters ago in Tanakh can be a long time ago. And so therefore we have to understand that David right now is in his late 60s. He's coming to the end of his political life and coming to the end of his life period. He's going to pass away at 70 years old. And so everyone is jockeying for position for who is going to be the next leader of Am Yisrael. And it makes sense that Avshalom, even though he has killed Amnon for the reprehensible behavior that he did with Tamar last week, even though he allowed that murder, he ordered that murder, nevertheless, in Yoav's mind, because he's not God, Avshalom has all the qualities to be king, which we will see in this chapter. Number 1 being, he's good looking, and we'll see that with beautiful hair. We'll see that later on. But he's not a Navi, he's no prophet, and he's not Hashem. So what he thinks is Ra'ui LaMalchut, is fit for kingship, is not. And we have to remind ourselves all the way back to Shemuel in Shmuel Aleph, who, when he's told you're going to appoint one of Yishai's children to be king, he doesn't think it's going to be David. And God tells him, don't think about externalities. Don't think it's all about good looks and stature. I'll tell you what a king is. It's that red-headed shepherd boy over there, which is very surprising. But there you go. In Tanakh, we're not English, we're not American. Redheads have all the qualities. Their fiery tendencies make them Ra'ui L'Malchut. And there's no bias there whatsoever. Anyway, with that introduction, let's jump into the Psukim. Vayeda Yoav ben Tzeruya, Hilev HaMelech al Avshalom. And Yoav, the son of Tzeruya, knew that the king's heart longed for Avshalom. Vayishlach Yoav Tekoa, Vayikach Misham Isha Hachama. So Yoav, he goes to Tekoa, and he took from there a wise woman. Okay, now before we get any further, we have to ask, what's so exciting about Tekoa? Now Tekoa, think about Tekoa now in 2021. I always think about it as a hipster, a hippie, kind of hipster yishuv in the about 20 minutes from Yerushalayim. But that's not how it's thought of in the time of Tanakh. So we'll see how they understand Tekoa back then. But before that, let's just have a look at the introduction brought by the Ma'am Loez, which we'll see here if I can not dizzy ourselves by getting too far down. The Ma'am Loez says in his intro, at the end of the previous chapter, we saw that David has already been comforted concerning the death of Amnon, but now his soul longs for his son Avshalom. David finds himself in a state of emotional distress. On the one hand, he longs exceedingly for Avshalom, and on the other hand, he cannot restore Avshalom, Amnon's cold-blooded killer. By the way, he didn't kill him, but at least cold-blooded orderer of death, as if nothing had happened. Avshalom did indeed have good reasons to be angry with Amnon, who had raped his sister and failed to take responsibility for her, but this does not legitimize ordering a kill. Yet it should be remembered that Avshalom did not kill Amnon with his own hands, but rather he commanded his men to do the deed. Furthermore, the parallels of David, who ordered Uriah to be killed on the front lines, are still ringing in our ears from chapter 11. And so therefore, it's interesting here. What's holding back Avshalom being fully reconciled? Is it that he killed one of David's beloved sons, his firstborn, Amnon, who would have been king? Or is it because David feels guilty because he knows he's having divine punishment for what he, sorry, the light is playing a little funny in my room here. That he's feeling his own guilt to the fact that he ordered Uriah to be murdered. Again, we know that Uriah deserved to die because he was insubordinate. But still, there must be a guilt association which David is feeling. So where is this going on here? Is Avshalom, are we not bringing him back because he ordered his brother to be killed? Or is it the guilt which David is associated with his own order to have Uriah killed? And that's what's bothering him. You know, what's really the essence here? Is David saying, I cannot be king, and therefore Avshalom is inappropriate to be king? Or is it no, David is inappropriate to be king if it were not for the fact that he did teshuvah, and perhaps Avshalom hasn't done teshuvah, and perhaps that's the motivation. And maybe that's something which we're going to get into, which is Avshalom may externally be no different to David, but internally may be Lora Uila Malchut, not fit for kingship. And perhaps there is something we can talk about. So here, let's understand this thing about the smart Tekoan woman. Rashi quotes Chazal and says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, because olive oil, Shemen Zayit, is found there, because it's difficult to make olive oil, it requires great effort, we know that wisdom is found there too. Okay, it takes a degree, and so therefore I'm going to go there and find wisdom. And the smart women of Tekoa are going to be good. Now, on a practical sense, why Tekoa and not Yerushalayim? Probably because David knows many of the women in Yerushalayim. Again, I'm not saying that, saying something about David's character. I'm saying he knows the smart women. He knows who they are. Whereas it could be in the village of Tekoa, which is a 20-minute drive today, is not a 20-minute drive there. And so he doesn't know all those smart women. So he's hiring someone who isn't known to David to be the actress to play this role of giving a parable to David. And we're going to understand this parable now as we go through the Psukim. To back up to the Psukim, I'm seeing there's notes before we can carry on. 1 second. The prophet Amos is also from Tekoa, but much later in history. Absolutely. Tekoa is a good place. And again, could well be, it's a makom, it's a place of Talmud Torah and of saintly women and scholarly sages. Absolutely. So, Pasuk Gimel. Uvat el hamelech v'dibart elav kadavar haz... Oh, I didn't read the pasuk. Vayomer Ilahi, he said to her back in Bet, Hit ablina v'livshina v'gdei evel v'al tachsuchi shemen v'hayit ke'isha ze yamim rabim mitabelet al met. Please pretend to be a mourner and please put on mourning clothes and do not anoint yourself with oil, but be as a woman who has mourned many days for the dead. It's interesting here, we learn the halacha that you're not allowed to anoint oneself when one is in avelut, at least during Shiva. We learn that from this pasuk here about do not anoint yourself with oil. Uvat el hamelech, and you shall come to the king, v'dibart elav, and you shall say to him, kadavar hazer, in this manner, vayasem Yoav et hadarim b'fiha, and Yoav put the words into her mouth. Vatome ha'isha hatakoit, and the Tekoan woman said, El Amer, to the king, Vatipol al aperha, and she fell on the ground. She fell on her face to the ground like this. Vatishtachun, she prostrated herself. Vatome Hoshia Melech, God save the king. Vayomer la hamelech, and the king said to her, Malach, what's up? Vatomer aval isha almana ani, and she said, I am an almana, I'm a widow. Vayamot ishi, and my husband is dead. Almana ani, vayamot ishi, and my husband is dead. An interesting line that. I'm a widow and my husband is dead. I didn't even look for commentary on that, but just an interesting statement there of I'm a widow and my husband is dead. Why the necessity? If you got an answer, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
Well, one possibility is that she wants to point out the concept of dead husband. So I mean, everybody knows what David did. She's making a veiled reference to Uriah.
Beautiful. Again, look at me. I'm not just a widow. I am from a dead husband. And how'd you get dead husbands? Sending them to war. Or having overly powerful kings. Yeah, very nice. A veiled musar. Absolutely. But again, she could have just said my husband's dead. I'm not sure, Rob, whether that explains the double language you're saying, but for sure I understand why it's part of that.
Perhaps the double language is also all the halachot that involve an almanah as well. So it's carrying both of those pieces together of what a king does, like Rob was saying, and also all the halachot about how we must look after an almanah.
Good, absolutely. Again, why would David, king of Israel, what's he doing talking to almanot? Because there are halachic responsibilities to show sensitivity and kindness towards them. Very good. Let's carry on. Ulshifchatcha shnei banim, your handservant, I had 2 children. Vayinatzu shnehem basadeh, and they both fought in the field. Ve'ein matzil benehem, and there was no one to rescue them. Vayakoh ha'echad et ha'echad, vayamet oto, and one struck the other and killed him. What's it sound like? Who does it sound like? Come on, guys. It sounds like Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. They were in the field, no one stopped them, and one struck the other, and the other died. Okay? Zayin. V'hinei kama kol ha'mishpacha al shivchatecha, vayomru tni et makeh achiv unmitehu benefesh achiv asher harag v'nashmida gam et hayoresh v'kchibu Et gachalti asher nishara levoti simli ishi shem usharit al panei adama. And behold, the whole family has risen against your handmaid and said, deliver the one that struck his brother whom he slew, and so destroy also the heir, and so they shall quench my coal which is left, so as not to leave my husband a name or a remainder upon the face of the earth. Now, what's interesting here is I said you have these overtones of Cain and Hevel. We also have the overtones of Naomi.
Ruth, yeah.
And Ruth and Naomi, and Elimelech's dead, and Machlon and Chilion are dead, and she's saying, what's going to happen to me? Except here, we haven't got the two sons are dead. She's saying, they want to kill my last remaining son. What am I to do? Now, here, we get into, and the Abarbanel comes to explain the mashal. And he says, since Avshalom was not warned, there was no hatra'ah there before he carried out his plan to have Amnon killed, he should not be considered guilty of his crime. David could have decided now that the 3-year exile was enough of a punishment, and now that could move forward with Avshalom being fully rehabilitated into palace life. What she's saying is, I'm giving you a pitchon peh. I'm giving you an opening. What do you want to do now? Do you want to stay in this mindset that Avshalom can never come back? He can never be reconciled. He has to stay in exile, in Geshur, because of what he did? Or is 3 years exile enough punishment for a, let's be honest, killing a bad hat? Amnon is not someone who I have a lot of sympathy for. And again, no one deserves to die. But same time, why are we being so hard on Avshalom? So, what does David say to the woman? He says, Vayomer HaMelech El HaIsha. King says to her, Lechi, go leveitech, to your home, v'ani atzaveh alach, and I'll tell you what to do. Vatomer HaIsha tekoet El HaMelech, and the Tekoan woman said to the king, Adoni HaMelech, ha'avon v'al beit avi, v'hamelech v'chis'o naki. She says to him, on me, my master the king, be the iniquity, and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. This is not your issue. Yes, I've come to you, but this isn't. Don't feel that this is your issue to solve. Vayomer HaMelech HaMedaber elayich v'ave'oto elai lo yosif od lagat bach. But the king said, whoever speaks to you, bring him to me, and he shall no longer continue to touch you. No, this is my responsibility. I'm king of Israel. I'm not going to allow this poor widow with one remaining son, I'm not going to allow you to be thus to happen to you. Vatomer yizkorna hamelech et Hashem Elohecha meharbat goel hadam leshachet velo yashmidu et b'ni vayomer chai Hashem im yipol misa'arat b'nech arza. And she said, I beg you, let the king remember the Lord your God, that the avenger of blood destroy not excessively, so they destroy not my son. And he said, as the Lord lives, if one hair of your son shall fall to all the earth. Now, what's going on here? Clearly, what's David saying? I will look after your son. No harm shall come to him. But what is David not figuring out? David, unlike the parable which Natan gave in chapter 12, which David realized was talking about him, here, David does not understand the parable. He doesn't get that the son who remains alive here is Avshalom. Now, why doesn't he get it? Perhaps because he knows through Ruach HaKodesh that what? Shlomo is going to be the next king. That he doesn't need Avshalom. This woman has 2 sons. One has been killed and the one remains. David has many wives and many sons. And so perhaps he doesn't feel the parable, it reflects the nature of his issue. And so he turns away from it. And so therefore, the Tekoan woman needs to once again speak out. And she says, Vatome ha'isha tedaber na shivchatcha el adoni hamelech davar vayomet daberi. And the woman said, may your handmaid speak a word with my lord the king. And he said, speak. Vatome ha'isha, and the woman said, V'lama chashavta kazot al am Elohim umedaber hamelech hadavar hazeh ke'ashem levoti hashiv hamelech et nidcho. And the woman said, why have you thought such a thing about the people of God? That the king in speaking this word has done so accidentally? That the king shall not bring back his banished one? Kimot namut. וחמיים הניגרים ארצה שלא יאספו ולא יישא אלוהים נפש וחשב מחשבות לבותי כך ממנו נידח. For die we must, and as water that is spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. And God favors not a soul, but he devises means that he had, that is banished, be not cast from him. ועתה אשר באתי לדבר על המלך אדוני את הדבר הזה, כי יראוני העם. ותאמר שפחתך אדברה נא אל המלך, אולי יעשה המלך את דבר אמתו. And now my motive having come to speak of this thing to the king, my lord, is because the people have made me afraid. And your maidservant said, I will now speak to the king. Perhaps the king will perform the request of his handmaid. Ki yishma hamelech lehatzil et amato mikaf ha'ish, להשמיד אותי ובני יחד מנחלת אלוהים. For the king will hear to deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man that would destroy me and my son together out of the inheritance of God. Vatomer shivchatcha yeh na devar Adoni hamelech limnucha ki kamalach Elohim ken Adoni hamelech v'shmoa hatov v'hara v'Adonai Elohecha yeh imach. And your handmaid said, let I pray the word of my lord the king be for comfort. For as an angel of God, so is my lord the king, to discern the good and the bad, and the Lord your God may be with you. Vayan hamelech, vayomer el haisha, al na techachadi mimeni davar asher anochi shoel otach. Vatomer haisha yedaber na adoni hamelech. And the king answered, and he said to the woman, I beg you not to hide from me anything that I shall ask you. And the woman said, let my lord the king please speak. And finally, we're getting to the crux of this, which is David's finally, again, maybe after all the women have figured it out, David finally gets that there's something going on here. Why is she speaking in all these riddles and all of these parables? There's no such evil in Israel. Then what is it? What is really going on? And the king says, let me ask you. Vayom hamelech hayad Yoav itach b'chol zot? Could it be that my good friend Yoav is involved in all of this? Vata'an ha'isha vatomer chei nafshecha adoni hamelech im ish lehamin ulehasmil mikol asher diber adoni hamelech ki abdecha Yoav hu tzivani v'hu sam b'fi shivchatcha kol hadevarim ha'eleh. And the woman said, as your soul lives, my lord the king, if anyone can turn to the right or to the left from all that my lord the king has spoken. For yes, you're right. Your servant Yoav has bade me. He has put in the mouth of your maidservant all these words. Leva'avor sabev et penei hadavar asa abdecha Yoav et hadavar hazeh v'adoni hacham ka'achmat malach ha'elohim ladat et kol asher ba'aretz. In order to bring about the face of the matter, has your servant Yoav done this thing. And my Lord is wise according to the wisdom of an angel of God to know all that is in the earth. Vayomer hamelech el Yoav. So she's done. So now it's time for David to talk directly to Yoav. Vayomer hamelech el Yoav. Hinei na asiti et hadavar hazeh v'lech hashev et hana'a et Avshalom. And the king said to Yoav, behold, now you have done this thing. Now go bring back the young man Avshalom. So it's worked. Yoav's plan is right. What was Yoav's plan? That the Tekoan woman, through her story of Cain and Hevel, of Naomi and Elimelech, that perhaps this is bringing back Avshalom. He's very excited. It all seems to go right. Vayipol Yoav el panav arza, vayishtachu, vayvarech et hamelech, vayomer Yoav hayom, yada avdecha ki matzati chem be'einecha adoni hamelech, asher asa hamelech devar avdecha. And Yoav fell on his face to the ground, and he bowed down, and he blessed the king. And Yoav said, today your servant knows that I found favor in your eyes, my lord, O king, in that the king has done the request of your servant. Vayakom Yoav, vayelech Geshura, vayavet Avshalom Yerushalayim. So what happens? Yoav goes up, and he goes to Geshura, and he brings Avshalom to Jerusalem. And here's where it gets interesting. Vayomer hamelech yisov el beito ufanai lo yireh vayisov Avshalom el beito upnei hamelech lo ra'ah. And the king said, let him turn to his house, but my face let him not see. And Avshalom turned to his house, and the king's face he saw not. Now, what's happening? What's the misunderstanding here? Like, Yoav had a plan. What's the plan? It is a reconciliation of Avshalom with David. But that's not the way that David understood it. What did David say? Okay, Avshalom no longer needs to live in exile in Geshur. But he's certainly not going to be the anointed. He's not going to be the next king of Israel. He's not going to be the crown prince. I'm not seeing him. Why did you bring him to Jerusalem? He can come back to Israel. He can go live with Tekoa, with the smart Tekoan woman. But don't bring her here. So don't bring him here. Look at the commentary. Commentary says, David did not want the people to think that Avshalom's return as his having pardoned him for killing Amnon. They would say that Avshalom was justified in redressing the outrage his brother had perpetrated. Thus David said, but my face he will not see. I am guilty of having Uriah killed. Therefore, I cannot allow Avshalom to be the next king. There must be some significance, some showing. So if you want to bring him to Yerushalayim, to the royal capital, great. But I ain't seeing his face. He cannot come to my table. It's not going to be there. And so therefore, the Navi interrupts our story to tell us about Avshalom. And it says, Uch Avshalom lo haya ish yafeh b'chol Yisrael. Lehalel ma'od mikaf raglo v'ad kodkodo lo haya bomum. Now Avshalom, there was not a man in all Israel as beautiful, to be as totally praiseworthy for beauty, from the head to toe, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish on him. Uvgalecho et rosho. והיה מקץ ימים לימים, אשר יגלח כי כבד עליו, וגילחו, ושקל את שיער ראשו 200 שקלים באבן המלך. And when he shaved his head, and it was at every year's end that he shaved it, because the hair was heavy on him, that he would shave it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. ויוולדו לאבשלום 3 בנים, ובת אחת, ושמה תמר, היא הייתה אישה יפת מראה. And to Avshalom were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, and he named her Tamar after his sister, and she was a woman of beautiful appearance. And it says, Vayeshev Avshalom b'Yerushalayim shnatayim yamim u'panei hamelech lo ra'a. But Avshalom dwelt in Yerushalayim, and we talked about this many times. 2 days, yamim doesn't mean days, it means years, as we've seen many times. And the king's face he did not see. Now, we need to get into the crux of this. Why is the story interrupted to tell us how beautiful Avshalom is? That every year he'd get a beautiful haircut and donate his money, his hair to charity. What's going on? Or that he had 3 children and one of his children was named after his sister Tamar. What's happening in all of this? Says the Radak, the Navi interrupts the story of the reconciliation of Avshalom to his father David to tell us of his beauty, to show that Avshalom thought that he was the most appropriate of David's sons to take over the throne, just like Yoav did. But since Avshalom realized that he would not be king, he would rebel against David during his lifetime. All the Jewish people would support him because he had all the external qualities of kingship, such as stature, beauty, and lineage, both on his father's side, of course, but also his mother's side, also from royal line, not Jewish, but non-royal kings. Radak to Shemuel Bet on the next pasuk, Avshalom was a Nazir, but his intentions were not sincere. He grew his hair not for God, but to show off his external beauty, that he should be the crown prince and next in line to the throne. What's he doing? By naming his child Tamar, what's he saying? All of my actions are justified. Everything that I am, all that I am, is to be the next king of Israel. Reconcile with me, or else. Avshalom is not coming in a contrite, with humility, asking David, Chatati, I should not have killed my brother. He's saying, I did everything right. Look at my daughter Tamar, named after my sister who was raped. Look at my hair. Look at my head. I am Ra'ui lemalchut. And David said, Yoav, you're all wrong. This isn't someone who needs to be king. Leave him out in the cold for another 2 years. He cannot be king. He must not rule. You don't understand. Avshalom is a Bal Ga'ava. It's arrogance. He must not rule. He cannot rule. So we continue and conclude the chapter. He's left out in the cold for 2 years. And so what happens? Avshalom, with his sense of entitlement, he is unhappy that he's been excommunicated or he's in some sort of partial cherem, that he is going to carry on fighting. And so what's he going to do? He's going to upset Yoav. So what does he do? Vayishlach Avshalom el Yoav, לשלוח אותו למלך ולא אהבה לבוא אליו, וישלח עוד שנית ולא אהבה לבוא. So Avshalom sent to Yoav to send him to the king, and he would not come to him. So he sent again a second time, and he would not come. What's realizing? Now Yoav has realized, you know what? Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps David thinks that one of the other children is more fit to be king than Avshalom, and so he's not flogging a dead horse. He's going to give up on Avshalom. But here, Vayome el avadav re'u chelkat Yoav el yadi, v'lo sham se'orim lechu v'atzitua ba'esh, v'yatzitu avdei Avshalom et hachelka ba'esh. And he said to his servants, see, Yoav's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Avshalom's servants set the field on fire. Vayakom Yoav vayavo el Avshalom habaita vayome elav lama hitzitu avadecha et hachelka sheli ba'esh. So Yoav arose, he came to Avshalom to his house and said, wait, why have your servants set my field on fire? What are you doing? Enough, calm it down. Vayomer Avshalom el Yoav, and Avshalom says to Yoav, Hinei shalachti elecha lemor, bo hena ve'eshlecha otcha el hamelech lemor, lama bati migeshur, tov liod ani sham, v'ata repnei hamelech, v'im yesh bi avon, hemitani. And Avshalom said to Yoav, behold, I've sent to you saying, come here, that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me were I still there. And now I will see the king's face. And if there be iniquity in me, let him kill me. What's going on? Avshalom is saying, I'm a king. I'm a son of a king on both sides. I'm a prince on the Davidic line, and I am the son of a princess, the grandson of the king of Geshur on my mother's line, meaning I'm going to be king one way or another. I didn't come here to this. And if you think that I deserve to be killed, then have David kill me, because this is even worse. Again, do you see any feeling of humility here? Do you see any sign where he thinks, perhaps I'm wrong? Perhaps I did something wrong? No, I am justified. Why? Because my sister was raped. And it doesn't matter that I had Amnon killed. Now, do I sympathize with him? Do I think I understand how he could make such an error? Absolutely, I understand how he could make such an error. That this person is not Ra'ui LaMalchut. And so forth, the Pasuk concludes, Vayavo Yoav el HaMelech, so Yoav comes to the king, Vayaged lo, and he tells him, Vayikra el Avshalom, so he calls to Avshalom, Vayavo el HaMelech, and he comes to the king, Vayishtachu lo al apav arza, and he bows down to the ground, in front of the king. He shows fealty, and he acknowledges the king. Vayishak HaMelech la'Avshalom, and the king kisses Avshalom. Now, what's missing there? The father kisses the son. David kisses Avshalom. What does it say? The king kisses Avshalom. This is an external kiss. Have a look here at the end of our notes. We have the Ralbag and the Malbim. The prefix lamed implies that the kiss was not on the lips. This was without warmth or affection. I go even further. This wasn't a kiss on the lips. This wasn't even a kiss on the cheek. This was a kiss on the hand. This was a fealty kiss. This wasn't a kiss on the head. There's no love here. The Malbim, since the kiss was not that of a father to his beloved son who would rule in his place, the kiss sowed the seeds for Avshalom to rebel. What is it with Avshalom? He wants to be loved by his father. And his father cannot love him because he killed Amnon. And he was upset with Amnon, but he couldn't punish him because he knew that all these punishments are because of his own actions. David cannot act. He's paralyzed because he knows that all these things happening here to him are because of what he did to Bathsheba and what he did to Uriah. Again, rightly or wrongly, we've talked about this. He didn't do adultery, he didn't do murder, but these are all punishments. And so therefore, Avshalom, with his sense of entitlement, I can commit murder, I can sanction murder because Amnon raped my sister. And David saying, no, you can't. There are consequences to your actions. You cannot be king of Israel. And Avshalom cannot handle this. And that is why next week he is going to rebel against the king. Thank you, my friends. That's my wrap for this chapter.